Hey teachers, we are getting ready to talk about how we can use what we already know to enhance our virtual instruction. We're going to be doing that via the Reading for Meaning strategy, which I know some of you are already familiar with and have already used in your classrooms. However, I also know that all learners are alike in that sometimes we need to be exposed to something multiple times for it to really sink in. So we're going to touch back on this strategy just in case you haven't ever heard of it or you haven't had a chance to use it in your classroom yet. So let's just take a quick review. What is this Reading for Meaning strategy? Well, Reading for Meaning comes from this book called The Core Six. The great thing about Reading for Meaning, as you can glance at there on the screen, is it has things for students to do before they read, to actively manipulate the content while they read, and then to reflect on what they find after they read. We want to use this strategy because, of course, we want our kids getting into complex text in a way that makes it accessible for them. And that is exactly what this strategy is designed to do. We know that when we are in virtual classrooms, it's really hard to tell if our students are actually reading the text that we want them to read. This is a way that will help them know what they're looking for, to find those salient points in the text and be able to pull out text evidence, which of course is what we are always wanting our students to do. And it just reinforces the good basics of reading, such as what's the main idea, make some inferences, supporting your inferences with text evidence, etc. So here's a quick review of what Reading for Meaning is. Before reading, as the teacher, I'm going to select a short passage. This works best with, not an entire chapter of a book, just a short piece of text. I'm going to generate some statements that I put down the middle of that graphic organizer you can see there on the screen. These statements can be absolutely true and provable by that text, or they can actually be disproved by the text. Then the first thing I'm going to do with my students is to preview those statements so that they know what they're going to be looking for as they go into the text. The next thing that's going to happen is my students will read the text and they are going to be looking for information that either supports those statements or refutes those statements, and they will record that on their graphic organizer. When we are in person, I then like to have my students come together and talk to a partner about what they found. And I always tell them it's not cheating if your partner found some evidence that you didn't find. That's just called using your resources, right? So having those partner conversations can be so valuable. However, in a virtual space, it does make it a lot more tricky to do that step. So if we can't, then we take that evidence that the students just found and we go right down into our whole group discussion, which is where we share, what did you find? What's the text evidence that either supported or refuted those statements? Then we can wrap up the lesson by writing a little bit about what we learned. So here's an example. I believe I used this in one of your classes, probably in 7th grade when you were doing, I'm not sure. Anyway, this is one that I've actually used at Maui Waina. The piece of text that they were going to be using was the Pacific Neighbors, Chapter 10. So right down the middle, I created some statements that I knew there was either going to be evidence that supported or was refuted in the text. And you can see that last statement there on the screen, dropping the atomic bombs on Japan was the right decision. I knew that in the piece of text, there was actually going to be evidence that both supported and refuted that statement. And that was going to lead to a really rich discussion in the classroom. So here's what we're going to do. This is your chance to do two things at once, kill two birds with one stone. I'm actually going to have you experience the Reading for Meaning strategy by reading an article on Edutopia about virtual strategies that will improve what you do in your classroom. So what I'm going to have you do is go to your Google form where you're watching this video right now, and you're going to find a link to this particular template. And in the template, you see a link to an article on Edutopia. So you're going to then go to the article. It's going to look like this. You will read that article, and what you're going to be looking for as you read, this is the part where we go over these statements together. These are the statements that you're going to be able to look for evidence that will support or refute. It's simple to get students to engage in a virtual classroom. A flipped classroom can lead to better discussions during virtual teaching and learning. Back and forth dialogue is nearly impossible in a virtual learning situation. And viewing classmates' projects through virtual gallery walks gives students an opportunity to learn from each other in a virtual setting. Those are the statements that you are going to be finding evidence that either supports or refutes those statements. Once you are finished with this particular graphic organizer, after you finish reading the article and finding your evidence, then you're going to come back into our time together. There will be one more video waiting for you, and that will be our wrap up. So off you go into this particular link, and it's going to allow you to practice the reading for reading strategy and get more virtual strategies to practice in your classroom. So I'll see you in a little bit.